There will always be something about cryptic walking simulator games that get under your skin and into your head. It always gets me. Perhaps the hidden lore and the puzzles, which I hate puzzles, is what brings us deeper into the mystery and immerses us into the story. Like the act of me needing to know something, thinking about everything over and over again because that's just who I am, I'm an overthinker, is what sends me down the rabbit hole. And there's also something about a kid asking for help that just hits differently, especially when that kid is writing about ancient gods and how his whole family is trying to kill him. Something about that is just a bit abnormal. And after writing this script, I have a theory that is depressing to think about, where a boy has dark thoughts that nobody, much less a child, should have. And no, I know what you're thinking. It's not just that. I mean, it is that specific ideation, but it is also something else. Something more unhinged and deeply unstable. And yet, this is how the story starts. A letter to a man we play as, this paranormal detective, Paul Prospero. Said letter was from a 12-year-old boy who could see what very few people could, things of the supernatural kind. So we're here to find that boy. Chris Hansen is about to show up at any minute. Foremost, his words would be seen as the fantastical writings of a child, but something in Ethan's words felt real. He talked about his hometown, a dark place called Red Creek Valley, tucked away in the mountains of rural Wisconsin, a place forgotten by time and people. I thought it was beautiful here, nature untouched by man, where the woods were quiet, the water ran deep, and I imagine the air smelled crisp. But as is normally the case for beautiful things, when you look close enough, you will find specks of vile and haunted. In this case, you'll find 5 murders, each with their own twisted atmospheres but connected by one thing, a mysterious figure. So what's going on? How can we understand it, and where is Ethan Carter? So, can you dig it? If you like these types of videos, the like button is right there waiting for you to boop it. If you don't, tapping the dislike button helps me out too, as all engagement is engagement. But since you're still here, you're coming with me. Welcome to
The Vanishing of Ethan Carter.
Ethan warned us not to be fooled by the views. And boy, he was not wrong, because the first thing we come up to is a rail car with blood on the side. A terribly stark contrast against the gorgeous backdrop. Down the tracks we find a rope, a wide trail of blood with severed legs, and following the trail, a victim. Trying to use my psychic abilities to piece together what happened, I'm unable to. Deciding to solve that mystery later, I stop by a small station. Checking the clock, it reads 7:04. I wonder if that's going to have any connections later on. Nearing a bridge, we think about how this town was deserted, left to become the worst version of itself, and there is where rot would grow, here among the silent hills. And where there is rot, you'll usually find people. Humans who never take accountability, always blaming it on some kind of mental distress. I guess if you give it a name, it helps you control the situation, but I think it also gives you another way out, instead of having to own up to your own shit. Making our way into town, we find 2 houses. Entering one, I find a letter from some mad sorcerer, invoking the names of otherworldly beings to protect his possessions and to turn this house into one of confusion. Honestly, I did get lost. I don't know how the guy on the YouTube walkthrough was able to figure this puzzle out. But during my frenzy, walking through a bunch of different portals, I did happen upon the attic, which had a bunch of classical literature. Some Jules Verne, Mark Twain, and... is that H.P. Lovecraft I see? Whoever was up here loved books, loved reading, mayhaps even wanted to become a writer themselves. But pressing on, we find the room the sorcerer was trying to hide from the world. It glowed with alchemy, books, a severed head, and an excerpt that talked about this magician. He could see the future with his potions, and people would come to the village for his potions. But he would deny them, and as a consequence they would burn his house down. However, in response to this, to protect his potion room, he cast a spell, and the people never saw him or his potions ever again. Now, as we put the excerpt down, we fade back into relative reality, listening to a conversation between Ethan and somebody named Chad. Chad would admonish Ethan for hanging around this room, adding that he needs to knock it off with his stories. And that is when it hits me. This magician, this story, was written by Ethan, and maybe those were his books in the attic. It could be that he wrote this story about the House of Confusion and the magician trying to protect his room of potions because that's just who he was. how he made sense of the world. If we run along this thread of thought, we know that he was passionate about reading and writing. I mean, this is a pretty creative story he just told, and it seems that he combined reality with fiction because another letter in the room would reveal more context. This burned down house was running an illegal moonshine operation, and I think Ethan saw this room, guarded by this Chad fellow, and made up this magical story. A brilliant way to build his own version of the truth while feeding into his passions. Also, on the other side of the newsletter, we see that NASA launched the ATS-6 satellite, which means this game takes place around 1974. Entering the pink house next over, it looks strangely familiar. The layout is exactly the same as the alchemist's house. However, each of these rooms holds memory for us to listen to. Talks about something coming from a house belonging to a family, the Vandegriffs. But more importantly, a woman stating that Ethan disturbed this entity known as the Sleeper, and because of his actions, now Ethan must be punished. Yet, Ethan claims he didn't do anything. He simply found a room and walked into it. His mother would take this information to her husband, telling him to talk to Ethan. Upstairs, we hear two other voices talking about the Sleeper being woken up as well, but unsure if the Sleeper was real or not. Another room, an older voice commanding Travis to leave Ethan alone because apparently he's been eyeing him in what I gather to be a threatening way. But Travis would focus on needing to get Ethan for the Sleeper. Another memory shows that the father is astounded that everybody's gone crazy. In the attic with his books, Ethan screams that he didn't mean for any of it to happen. Something otherworldly was going on, and Ethan's family entirely blamed him. Whatever the case may be, Ethan's family wanted to hurt him. Taking the path up the hill, we come to church. It's been a while since I've been here, but finding nothing in the house of God, nor in the cemetery, we continue, pondering about the dead, how little they know, how they don't know that they are not. They've become ghosts, wandering endlessly and aimlessly, looking for memories where there are only husks. They walk paths by lakes, searching for their carcosa, but only ever finding themselves stuck in a loop, just like us. Because I have absolutely no idea where to go. Until I decided to head back to whence I came, and along the way, I found 4 TV screens out of place here in the woods. Touching them like you touch the like button, suddenly an astronaut phases in before me. Chasing the Rocketman leads me to a spaceship, and when I walked up to it, I was whisked away into outer space. Among the stars and many other space pods, I turned around to find another note. This time, a story about a beast in the forest who came into contact with an extraterrestrial. I believe this story tries to convey that the beast was taken into space as well. Were we the beast just now? Putting the paper down, we hear another memory of Ethan and Travis. Once more, we see how Ethan is unsupported in his pursuit of writing. Even more so when we pick up the cover of a story and it's shown that Travis would call him a slur for liking literature, which is actually brain-dead thinking. Ladies and gentlemen, words were invented to woo women, respectfully. Music, poetry. I love my wife, and articulation, having a way with words, definitely scored me a lot of points with her. Plus, are you guys seeing the things that women are reading nowadays? Look up A Court of Thorn and Roses. You want to tell me that books and storytelling aren't the way to a girl's heart? I think having that sensitive side, but also being balanced with the sturdiness of what a man is often portrayed to be in whatever demographic you hail from is just about right. It's about balance. From what I've seen, one way too far or the other, and you're less likely to get wifey material. Keyword wifey. But if you just want to add another notch to your headboard, that's you. Cool flex, I guess. But it's all about balance. Too emotional, it's unattractive. Too much male toxicity that they can't change, and I think you're less than likely to find real love. That was a big side tangent, but the point is words cast spells. Sorry, I got lost both in writing this script and in the game because for about 40 minutes I was just wandering around until I finally decided to head back to the very beginning. Here, I noticed a rope in the trees and going to investigate, a trap sprung. After finding another, I got distracted by the light at the end of the tunnel. I need the light, brother. But the tunnel only loops us back to where we came from. At this point, I wondered if this world was even real. Was Paul Prospero, psychic detective, real? Or was this just another story crafted by Ethan Carter? Because that should not have happened. Top that, there's no wildlife here, and I'm pretty sure there should be in this kind of landscape. However, moving forward, after finding the rest of the Vietnam War era traps, the world opens up into another area of the forest, where I missed a note by the tree. But, going back to pick it up, we read about an old man who would go drinking sap in the forest. However, one night, somebody started a fire, and the old man would find everyone's bones, and seeing the ruins of his village, he would sit down, crying, and finding more sap to drink. Another echo of the past. Ed tells Ethan that he can't be here, but Ethan tells his grandfather that he wrote something for him. Next to Ethan's story, we find a bottle, and a couple more bottles and cigarettes nearby. This forest is where his grandfather used to drink moonshine, but we also find something else. A charred newsletter of a house fire, discovering that Ed accidentally killed his wife. He fell asleep with a cigarette in hand, causing the huge fire that killed her, spiraling Ed into alcoholism, and Ethan's story was about him. The sap was the moonshine. His grandfather felt deep guilt for killing his wife, which he should. The achievement we get for unraveling this story is even described as survivor's guilt. I think Ethan wrote stories for and about each of his family members, based in reality, steeped in fiction. Reading the other side of the newspaper, we learn about the Vandegriffs. They were a wealthy and industrial family, but when the lead of the family, the patriarch, died in a mining accident, it destroyed the company and destroyed the local economy, which explains why Red Creek Valley is now a ghost town. The Vandegriffs didn't want to live there anymore, and so that's why the Carters would start living there, hence why we see all those we hear all those memories around the house. Side note, on the side of this note, we see the headline, which appears to be talking about the withdrawal from Vietnam being completed. This happens in 1973, which is also when X-Men Days of Future Past takes place. I enjoyed that movie. Discovering a crank by the water, we move the rail car from the bridge and near the scene of the man with the severed legs. After chronologically tagging each fragment of a memory, we use our psychic detective powers to visualize what went down. Still hellbent on harming Ethan as some form of sacrifice to the sleeper, Travis would tie Ethan down on the tracks to give him the Red Dead Redemption treatment. Down the line, Ed talks to his wife, wishing there was a different way, as he picks up a rock, walking to Travis and bashing him in the head with it. Grandpa was the only one trying to protect Ethan. Ethan gets free, and Travis is still discombobulated, stumbling around concussed on the railway, and then Gangster Grandpa uses the rail car to crush Travis's legs. While Travis is trying to crawl away, Grandpa tells Ethan to leave as he approaches Travis with the hand crank and executes him. Following the path down, Ed tells Ethan that he's sick, just like the rest of the family. The sleeper is in their heads. Ethan talks about needing to destroy the room. Ed says Corvus, which I don't understand what he means by that. Is that Ethan's other name? Why did he say Corvus? But he says that he can't let Ethan do that, and then the memory vanishes. Ed was doing his best, and he was doing a very good job at resisting the sleeper who fed on hate. The thing is, and some of you could probably relate to this, the older you get, the more useless your hate becomes. I don't know, when I was younger, I was a hothead, very aggressive, and the older I got, I just, I don't know what it is, I just started mellowing out. Is that just me, or can some of you guys relate to that? Finding an acorn among the serene views, it transforms into a grenade. Another potential nod to the Vietnam War. I am curious as to why. Chucking a grenade off the bridge and into the water, this one's for the boys. I hope that didn't kill any fish. Lost again. We revisit the Vandegriff Carter house to find a photo of the Carter family. From left to right, Ethan, Grandpa Ed, Travis, Mom, Dad, and Uncle Chad. On the back, Ethan recounts his family's emotions the day that the picture was taken. Wandering back to the church, we head into the cemetery, and after some detective work, aka watching a guide, we learn that Ethan's parents, Dale and Missy, were having an argument because Chad was in the process of entombing Ethan. Missy says it's a sacrifice to the sleeper. Dale was against it, but too chicken shit to save his own son, letting his deranged wife and brother-in-law kill Ethan. So, he would have to save himself by stabbing his uncle in the eye. Blaming Dale for being weak and not helping, Chad would try to kill him. Missy, attempting to stop him, plunges a knife into his neck, presenting Ethan with the opportunity to make like a tree and leave. But in his escape, Ethan would scare crows. This would signal to his mom the direction in which he ran. However, Ethan was clever. He gave her and his brother the slip. Circling back to the tomb, he finds his father, knife in hand, at odds ends about killing his son. Ethan, in a panicked tone, tells his father that he needs to get to the mine, where the Vandegriff patriarch had died. He tells Dale to keep his mom away from him, further adding that they're all sick. Advancing forward, we see another story about a witch who could see the future. And in this vision, she asks a series of moral questions before it flashes to a little tent surrounded by animal skulls. Reading Ethan's story, I think this reveals a great deal about his mother and their past, but also Ethan's mental state. This story is about a witch who went to his mom, said she was going to be pregnant. Now at first, Ethan's mom was overjoyed, but it soon turned into profound regret as she realized she didn't want a kid. In the story, when Ethan is older, he visits the witch, who, after hearing Ethan's answers to her moral questions, says she lied to his mom about having a child, and with that, Ethan vanished. His mom never became one, so she was happy again. I think this speaks to how Ethan is severely felt to be unwanted by his family, so much so to the point that he envisions himself in a world where he doesn't exist. The name of the achievement you get for this story is The Wish, where Ethan and his mother's wish comes true. His mother would write him a letter, apologizing, but more so trying to vindicate herself, making excuses to alleviate herself of responsibility for her actions, and then she undercuts her apology further by placing blame on Ethan, telling him to pull his head out of the clouds. The most excellent parenting. Finding the path Ethan took, we make our way into the mines. Elevator down and more detective work, we see what happened next. Missy would follow Ethan to the mines, with Dale failing to distract her. Convinced she needs to pay the sleeper with Ethan's life, she gets into the elevator and begins to head up. But Dale, finally growing a pair, stops the elevator, breaking the lock with a mining axe, preventing his wife from escaping, and then plunging her into the water below. The whole time, she's talking about how the sleeper must wake up and rise. Down the tunnel, Ethan, getting gas canisters, catches up with his dad, who tells him he needs to leave. And with Travis still hot on their tails, he runs. Descending deeper into the mines, we find a sign, a warning, telling us to go no further, that the ritual failed and that the Sea Thing gate remains sealed. Seems like something to do with the occult and likely another one of Ethan's stories. Further in, we hear it before we see it. I have a theory that this was the Vandegriff patriarch. Ethan heard about how he died down here in the mines and made up a story about him. Heading back to where we got jump scared, we continue the path until we find an opening into a cave with a spire that spirals upward. At the base, we find a note rhyming about the old gods, a nod to Ethan's love of Lovecraft. At the top of the spire, we open up a portal, releasing the old sea god himself. I could go for some calamari. Reading Ethan's story, the miners found the ancient and cursed book, but with some not wanting to perform the ritual to summon the outer god, one miner would kill the others, and as a result, the old god, Nai, I think that's how you pronounce his name, would curse the miner, condemning him to wander the mines forever. Listening to his father tell him that he shouldn't be in the mines, and to keep his whereabouts a secret from his mother, we learn that his father would come to the mines to work on his inventions. At least I think they were inventions. But he lacked creativity, because whatever it was that he tried to make, it was already previously patented before. As a result, the world would shut him down, and even his wife would tell him to get his shit out of the basement. They were a constant and cluttered reminder of her husband's failures. Outside the mines, we clear out into a lush greenery, and flowing on by is a river. I mean, damn, it is really beautiful out here. But again, heading on inside, the detective finds Dale, dead and in a dried pool of blood. After Dale told Ethan to run, he waited outside for Travis to come out of the mine. He swung his axe and missed. Threatened by Travis, who now holds the axe, Dale cowered before his advance, reasoning that they're sick and have been because of Ethan. Travis scorns, demanding to know where Ethan is, and his father outs his son easily, telling Travis he went to burn the Vandegriff room. In desperation, Dale runs inside the nearby house, closing the door. Of course, Travis johnnies his way into the room, and Dale says, ironically, after trying to chop him like firewood, that he doesn't want to hurt him. He takes scissors and jams it into his own throat. Travis just watches him and calls him a coward. Following a light to the dam facility, Travis finds Ethan, who told him to not listen to the voice in his head, but then that is when the vision ends. At first, I was wondering why we still see Travis, if in the beginning of the story, he had his legs chopped off and he was dead, but it just occurred to me that all of this is happening before his death. I think Travis walks Ethan from here to tie his little bro up at the rail tracks, and that is when Grandpa kills Travis. So we're kind of seeing things out of order. Detective Paul ascertained that the sleeper entity was feeding off of the Carter family's emotions. Their hate and negativity fueled it, creating a loop and causing them to go even more insane. Walking by the riverbank, we found a random scuba diver with a bolt action. Probably another Vietnam War reference, but finding a scuba diver here is weird. The achievement for this is called Unfinished Story, so maybe it has to do with one of Ethan's unfinished stories? Moving along, Paul Prospero could feel Ethan getting closer, saying he knew him, and he knew why he'd come. Stopping by the lake to admire its grand majesty and grace, I can't help but want to stop writing this script to go out and drive somewhere in nature with my wife just to enjoy the world. Not the one with humans in it to taint it with all their sludge, but the one where humans didn't exist and life could flourish. That's when I saw it. The Vandegriff House burned to a crisp, ashes to ashes, no sign of Ethan though. Walking past the lion statues and over a slab that says Ordo Corvus, we're reminded of what Grandpa Ed said to Ethan. Corvus. Putting that word into the puzzle opens up a secret passageway beneath the remnants of the house. Here, we find art of people slabbed into the walls. Then we find a man seared and sitting with his head in his knees and two notes beside him. One saying they haven't been themselves, hearing voices, and the other talking about a guy breaking up his wife. However, he didn't get to finish. Perhaps he's talking about burying his wife? I'm not sure. But he wonders who he fears more, his wife or the sleeper. Inspecting the incinerated corpse, we see that Ethan and Ed finally made it here. At first, Ethan was afraid his grandfather was still struck with the sleeper's madness, but he reassures him that his grandmother, his wife, was protecting him. So he was fine, and in fact, he wanted to help Ethan on his quest to burn the room. Ethan explains that for the sleeper to wake up, somebody needs to suffer, although it seems like there was already a lot of that going around. But Ethan explains it wasn't actually him who disturbed the sleeper. He reveals the people canvassed into the walls were victims of Vandegriff, who kept them alive in order to suffer as a sacrifice to the sleeper. But when Ed helps his grandson into the room, he lets it shut behind him, saying that the sleeper must not awaken. But that's when Ethan goes through with it anyway, starting the fire, to which Ed says it's too late and everybody dies anyway. The flames clasp onto his legs, and Ed sits down to burn. Once inside of the room Ethan spent so long trying to get into, we find him. He who sleeps. We finally find him. Ethan Carter. He didn't vanish, he was right here, and he was waking up. And he's baffled by our arrival, wondering if we're actually here. But it doesn't matter. We're too late. The truth is, this was Ethan's story. Unfinished but concluding, and concluding too late. Here in the basement, Ethan wrote stories and even drew pictures on the wall, mapping out the locations of where each story took place. Paul Prospero, psychic detective, was just that, another of Ethan's stories. We even see where the story begins is where we began, at the tunnel. Another thing to note, where every other story had been crossed out and completed, our story, Paul's, was the last one waiting to be crossed out. In a memory, we see Travis telling Ethan that Mom and Dad are mad he missed dinner. Stepping out, Dale tells Missy to be careful with the lamp that she's carrying. The Carter family is together. Chad talking smack about Ethan, his mom berating him for missing dinner. Behind her, we see more of Ethan's drawings, the people slabbed into the walls from his story. Ethan explains he lost track of time writing this story. Travis and Chad would both begin to verbally assault Ethan, and in a fit of rage, Missy swung around. But she did so with the lamp, setting fire to the room. Everybody panicked, and Ethan couldn't do anything. With the blaze intensely heating the door up, he couldn't open it, so he had to retreat back into the room. Choking on the smoke, he lays on the bed, ready to fall asleep at 7. Ethan talks to his creation once more, telling Prospero that he still has stories to finish. But we tell him that his story can end right here. It is a good ending. Ethan can let go. At 7:04, just like the clock at the station from the start said, 4 minutes after going unconscious, I believe Ethan dies. He lets go. But through the fire and flames, we see his family. His parents are trying to save him. Uncle Chad is dejected with his head against the post. Grandpa Ed is trying to put the fires out that latched onto Travis. This whole game, this story, took place within the span of 4 minutes. Not only was Ethan imagining and reliving his stories and his memories, he was finishing his final story. As mentioned, the stories of Ethan Carter were his creative liberties, finding life through articulation. This was his legacy, his letter to the world that he'd be leaving behind, and he left it for a world that would probably never see his work. In his stories, we see how he felt about being unwanted and unloved by his family, how they all aimed to hurt him. As a result, I think he had a plan to vanish. Ethan was the sleeper in his stories. It was how he envisioned himself as the one who caused his family to be angry and hate him. He justified their hate for them, as they were unwilling to take responsibilities themselves. Ethan believed he fed into their negative emotions. Even though he didn't do anything wrong, he felt like it was his fault, and it was through his literature that we can understand, on some level, conscious or deep unconscious, Ethan was suicidal. He wished to be dead, wishing to not have been born at all, to not be a burden to his family. But that doesn't exactly mean he was going to go through with it. I mean, for all we know, he might have just wanted to carry on, but maybe he was going to run away or something. But we can also see what and how everybody thought about Ethan. He was always writing stories, effectively always dreaming, having his head in the clouds, sleeping, hence the name The Sleeper. He had to wake up, but he wakes up too late because now he's in an inferno. His family ended up actually killing him, just like in his stories. Sure, it might have been an accident, but Ethan, processing this in 4 minutes, probably reasoned it differently. But what if it wasn't just about him planning to vanish from life? What if Ethan was just as demented as his family? What if the trauma from his family gave him a sickness, one that he got down with, inciting within him murderous intent? What if he was disturbed? I mean, he did envision and write about all of their deaths. That's kind of like premeditated murder, no? Ethan kills, visualizes all of his family members in each of the cases that Detective Prospero uncovers. Maybe these stories were like his death note, how he would imagine how they all die. Burned, drowned, stabbed, self-elimination, severed legs, and a brutal fatality. Especially Travis, he got the most sadistic ending in Ethan's stories, which makes sense since he would often be the one to be most abrasive towards him. His grandfather seemed to be the only one with an ounce of compassion for him. But what are your thoughts? How did you interpret the game? This was an eerily chilling and ultimately sad story, but what if we take this detective mystery even deeper and dive below the sea to uncover why this ship sank, seemingly out of nowhere? And what secrets was its crew hiding? If you're into stories about piecing together clues and ghost ships, click the video on the screen, and I'll see you aboard the Thalassa on the edge of the abyss.